From Wall Street to Main Street, this is LALATE.
It's a big evening of America's most watched show for financial news in prime time, Evenings LA, from the shores of Santa Monica, California, for April 9th, 2022. Major developing details on your fourth stimulus check update of 2022. Major news, major money, and major developments over the next 1 hour broadcast. Get your pen and paper ready as the GDP, as the inflation numbers, as everything you need to know about supply chain heats up like we never thought before. In tonight's recording, we go over not one, not two, but three major checks landing. Lots of money, and I'm going to show you how to get them in tonight's recording. But as other economic developing details continue to swirl like stagflation, a falling gross national product that could signal we're going into recession, supply chain disruption continuing to grow, and also inflation still at an all-time high. What does this mean for the U.S. economy and the Build Back Better Act? New push tonight to get that Build Back Better Act done. As other elements heat up across the board, as the Federal Reserve may likely come in too aggressively on those interest rate spikes. We'll go over the latest details tonight on the big economic developing details you need to know. Then we'll be looking at that student loan debt forgiveness with a May 2nd deadline. Huge details across the board. We'll be looking at six stimulus as we look overseas as the alliance of those Western countries, France, Germany, and the United States, try to get a stimulus package on the books before Vladimir Putin sends us into recession. We'll have the latest details in tonight's recording across the shores and across the sea. Then we'll be turning back to the United States and your big money as not one, not two, three checks have now landed. And I'm going to show you how, as a member, you can get these big checks across the board. We'll be looking at whether supply chain disruption at the ports and the shipping is causing the disruption of the U.S. economy. That's something Vladimir Putin and the Federal Reserve does not have an equation. I have all those incredible details tonight as supply chain continues to disrupt. And what does that mean for your money? From the shores of Santa Monica, California, folks, it's a big night, it's a big evening for April 9th, 2022. This is Evenings LALATE. And good evening, everybody. It's April 9th, 2022, and big developing details across the board on your fourth stimulus check update of 2022. Big developing changes overnight as the Federal Reserve is trying to battle inflation, and the Federal Reserve may be coming too aggressively on those issues as supply chain disruption continues to grow. As the GDP in the United States may drop to a flat number by the end of the year, currently tracking falling across the board. This is as supply chain disruption at the ports and the shipping continue to swirl out of control. It may look pretty in some parts of the economy, but other parts are already in recession. Which parts are in recession and what does this mean for you and your money? I have all the deliciousness and all the confusion in tonight's recording, but we're going to first, of course, cover those big checks. Three checks have landed. How do you get them? Become a member. They're coming up later in this recording. Stay with me throughout this 1 hour broadcast. We're going to go over all these incredible checks one at a time that you want to get and that you deserve to get. One at a time. Get your pen and paper ready. Over the next 1 hour broadcast, we're going to go over where the U.S. economy is, where it's going, where your money is landing, and where your money will be going thereafter. We start tonight with, of course, with the Build Back Better Act, the fourth stimulus recon, currently in the Senate, has three clusters of checks and three add-ons of checks. But tonight, a major developing shocker that no one saw coming. In fact, two shockers tonight. One on the news front and one on the check front. Let's look at those big checks of the Build Back Better Act, three clusters of checks and three add-ons. The first cluster has a lot of money, but across all these incredible clusters, how much money is there? There's $15,000 to $80,000 of checks, folks, across this incredible Build Back Better Act. Let's look at all those incredible checks, starting with the big money at issue. The big money at issue pays you an enormous sum of money, and that sum of money is incredible. incredible. $15,000, first cluster, let's look at it right now. Hazard pay got in there for my essential workers. One more year of the earned income tax credit made law under third stimulus. Then they got in there the CTC child tax credit, $3,600 for the young children, one more year across the land. They got in there money for elder care, $4,000 for them. Money for young children's care, $4,000 for them. Then college students, congratulations, $500 check for you, actually $550 for the Pell Grant recipients. Want to buy a new electric vehicle? Good. $12,500 checks are in there as well. Do you own a home? Good. Then we got money in there to repair the home if you live in a low-income community. It's huge. And that is the first of 30 classes of checks in the Build Back Better Act. As we turn to the first add-on of checks, it's a little bit less than $25,000. Maxine Waters got a provision added in the first add-on of checks that pays you a little bit less than $25,000 for the purchase of your first home. This is huge. How does it work? At the time of escrow, the federal government gives about $25,000 to the seller in your name for the purchase of your first home. Always wanted to own a home? Always wanted to have your name on the deed? Well, congratulations. They got this incredible provision in there. It's huge. And that is the first of 3 add-ons of checks to the Build Back Better. As we look to the second cluster of checks, we have a big surprise tonight, folks. That big surprise starts with the big items that are in the second cluster. And did one of the checks get removed? Let's look at the checks in that second cluster. In that second cluster of checks we have in there, paid leave. What is paid leave? It is a lot of money if you work and you have to stay home from work due to sickness or illness. $1,700 a week if you make $70,000 or more per year. If you make $35,000 annual salary, it's $800 a week. If you make $15,000 annual salary, it's $400 a week. W-2, 1099, you get it. Congratulations. And if your son or daughter works and they have to take off from work, then they get the check. How many weeks? 4 to 6 weeks per year, which will equate to an enormous sum of money. That would equate to about $4,000 to $6,000 across the board. Now let's go back to that second check in the second cluster of the Build Back Better Act. Oh boy, is it huge. Home repairs, in this case, to weatherize your home. But hold up, we have a big surprise there tonight on those weatherizing your home checks. They're law. They are law. The President of the United States took the provision out of the Build Back Better Act just a few days ago and made it law, and it's huge across the land. Let's look at what happened across this land tonight. A $6,500 check was supposed to be in the Build Back Better Act, but the President of the United States took it out, and you just saw what that check was. Let's look at the check now. It is, again, Check A. Huge. Check A removed from the Build Back Better Act. $6,500 made law March 31st. Great news. Check B also removed from Build Back Better Act, which we're going back into right now. As we look at Build Back Better Act, what is the second add-on of checks? Second add-on of checks, a little bit less than $250 billion of free home health care for seniors and people on disabilities. Great news. As we go to that third cluster check, even more deliciousness. Seniors checks, farmers checks, independent contractors checks, and then nutrition checks, free internet for all checks. But seniors clean up with lots of checks across the land. Dental checks, vision checks, hearing checks, lowering the medical eligibility age from 65 to 55. And then the Medicaid gap fix that will provide insurance to 12 states where uninsured people struggle to get insurance because of a workaround plan that will solve the situation tonight. Then that brings us up to the third add-on, which is par for the course for senators adding checks to the Build Back Better Act. What is that third check? That third cluster, that third add-on of checks, you know what it is. MSC, IRS MSC. How does it work? Legislators represent that they would add an MSC to the Build Back Better Act that would pay out the same as you got in the third stimulus. So let's recap. If you forgot who got a third stimulus check. Single individual, $75,000 less, you get it. Married couple, $150,000 less, you get it. Double it. Family of 4, quadruple it. And if you're on benefits, SSI, SSDI, Social Security, Railroad benefits, Veterans benefits, you get it as well. It's not income. It's not taxable. It's nationwide. It goes off the most recent tax return. And that most recent tax return, if it had direct deposit, that's how you get paid. Otherwise, a check in the mail. How many checks in the mail? Legislators represent they would give 6, up to 6. $2,000 the first month, $1,000 thereafter. And that includes even adult dependents. That, my friends, is the fourth stimulus Build Back Better Act Recon still in the Senate, and the proposal to add an MSC check in there. Now, the great news across the board is that you don't have to wait for Fort Symbols Recon to give you an MSC check, because guess what? It's Check C that is now law. Check C is now law. It's coming up later in this recording. This is a 1-hour broadcast, and stay with me across the entire recording with your pen and paper ready, because I'm going to go over all these checks over the next 1 hour. We're going to go over every check you can get. We're going to go over where your economy is going, where it is right now. We're going to go over where your benefits are going and where they're heading next, and what the president's doing and what he's doing next. But the great news tonight is that you don't need to look forward and hope for something in the future about an MSC. You can just grab it right tonight. Check C is a monthly stimulus check, and while Build Back Better Act proposed 6 checks, up to 6 checks, up to $7,000, $2,000, the first month $1,000 thereafter, viewers of this channel have cleaned up with C, Check C, and many viewers have gotten over $150,000, as one viewer got $66,000 on SSI and SSDI in the last 7 days. How do you get that check, those MSC checks, and all those other checks like A and B? You become a member. And I'm going to go over each of those checks in detail coming up later in this recording. So get ready for those details of what they are, where they are, and how you get them. They're coming up later in this recording. But first, if you haven't become a member, go under this membership, go under the video and become a member right now. Purple Hawk, Purple Power, or Calcino VIP. Get an incredible newsletter. The most comprehensive, the most in-depth, the only newsletter of its kind in America. Delivered Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time via the YouTube alert systems. More about that in a second. Now, let's go into the continuation of Build Back Better Act and also SS300. Jay Powell's trying to deal with a lot of issues, but is he dealing with them the wrong way? And what does it mean about GDP and supply chain? We'll go over all those details starting right now. Jay Powell's your head of the Federal Reserve. His job is to raise interest rates to reduce inflation. But does it work? And what is SS300? And could what Jay Powell's doing send us into, yes, recession? Let's go over all the analysis starting right now. What is SS300? It was a Joe Biden campaign promise and then a presidential platform at joebiden.com to swap your COLA for inflation. COLA is your benchmark that determines your benefits rise every year. And COLA doesn't work because it generally doesn't move. Swapping COLA to inflation would be great, because inflation is at its highest price point of a generation. As yours truly predicted last year, I predicted that inflation would come in at 8% in the month of December 2021. As the Federal Reserve, like Jay Powell said, was going to come in at 2%, be temporary. Untrue. It came in at 8% in December, and then at 8% in January, and continues to be potentially even higher if you believe that what's going on with the 10-year Treasury note. That's good news for you, because if Joe Biden made that swap from COLA to inflation right tonight, you can do the calculation. Your benefits would go up $200 more per month, not just this month, not just this year, but lifetime. Because once your benefits go up, they never go down. So if you're locked in at $200 more per month, right now, it's lifetime. Hashtag Joe make the call. If Joe Biden made the phone call right now, we're certainly at about an inflation rate of 8% right now, if not a little bit higher. That's great news. Then what comes next in December? In December, they reassess your benefits again for the next year, and inflation was supposed to track at 4%. By December, that would be another $100. That would be SS300. So what is the moving goalpost tonight when we look at the Federal Reserve, those inflationary concerns, those interest rates tonight? The job of the Federal Reserve, if you don't understand, is to deal with inflation. The way they deal with inflation under Jay Powell, its Federal Reserve chair, is they raise interest rates. That is their concept of how they do it. More about how they approach the situation tonight. They deal with inflation at the Federal Reserve by raising interest rates. So how do they deal with inflation? Number one issue is that they try to raise interest rates at a series of meetings, one meeting per month at the Federal Reserve. Those Federal Reserve meetings are called the FOMC meetings. And the Federal Reserve had its first significant one to battle inflation last month. In February, we were told by the Federal Reserve that they were going to do a quarter basis point at the March meeting and then stay at a quarter basis point indefinitely to battle inflation. They had the March meeting, they did a quarter basis point. Then the Federal Reserve pivoted under Jay Powell, and Jay Powell suddenly said, you know what? We may have to do a half a basis point, at least one meeting. That was then. Since then, the Federal Reserve and its governors, like Bullard, have said a lot more aggressive stuff than that. They have said that potentially we may have to do half basis point for 6+ meetings. Folks, this is not anything that anyone anticipated. This could potentially send us recession. More about that later in this recording. But these rising interest rates are nothing that anyone anticipated. Let me tell you where we are tonight. Tonight for April 9, 2022, a series of analysts are saying exactly what I've said over the last 2 weeks. Number one, the Federal Reserve hasn't really made up its mind. It's pivoting from quarter basis point weaker to half basis point stronger. Number two, this is the more important point. The Federal Reserve may not have the tools to bring down inflation. Oh boy. New analyst reports today confirm my report over the last 2 weeks, which I believe the Federal Reserve cannot bring down inflation to what it's going for. It's going for a 1.9% inflation rate in December. Wait a second. Yes, you heard me right. They said 4% in February, then by March they say they're going to do to 1.9. That's a big difference, folks. On your benefits, if it was 4% in December, you get another $100. If it's 1.9, you get $10. That's nothing. So that's why you want Joe Biden to make the swap from coal to inflation. What about your benefits right now? What about the month of April if Joe made the swap now, or May? Well, my analysis at the moment suggests that Jay Powell's movements on interest rates may not bring down inflation to 5% or 6%, maybe 7%. So not so catastrophic in the month of April, certainly not in the month of early April, but certainly potentially in the month of May. What do you need to know? Is that a lot of new analysts tonight are saying the following about the inflation, the Federal Reserve, and Jay Powell, and it's exactly what I've been saying over the last 2 weeks. Number one tonight is they're saying that Jay Powell simply does not have the tools. The Federal Reserve is speaking a notion that it has no tools to do. Number one, they say the Federal Reserve cannot bring down inflation rates the way they can. They think they can. They think that inflation will stay high despite what the Federal Reserve is saying. What does that mean for you? It means that the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates. So if you have student loan debts, if you have car payments, if you have anything you buy on interest, you're going to pay more interest. But your inflation may still be there. That's not something that you wish have hoped on. So why is that part of the equation? Why is that even happening? It's because of supply chain. Analysts tonight believe that it's the supply chain that is causing the rapid, out-of-control inflation in the United States. And if Jay Powell raises interest rates, he's just going to cost things more for you at home. He's not going to solve inflation because inflation is being caused by supply chain. If you're going to the port, if you're going to the train tracks, the delivery of goods is backed up in the United States. That supply chain disruption is nothing that Jay Powell can fix. And that supply chain disruption continues to grow across the country. That is why that inflation is likely to stay here. And if the inflation does stay here, what does that mean for your benefits? You're looking pretty, ready to wave like a waveable check at the beach. Because guess what? If Joe made that swap from coal to inflation today, you'd potentially lock in $200 more per month because we're potentially still at an 8% inflation rate tonight. And if they made that swap in May, then it looks like we may still be good. Moreover, I'm pretty much adamant and secure in saying tonight that if that's by December, I don't think Jay Powell's going to get inflation down to 1.9%. So it looks pretty good for that 4%, that additional $100 at the end of the year. Now, here is what's also breaking news tonight across the land. The way Build Back Better Act works as a stimulus package is when the economic data is weak, there's more support to pass it. What does economic data mean weak? It means the data is missing. What does missing mean? Let me give you an example. How many jobs were created in the U.S. economy in the month of March? Let's say Wall Street is expecting 100,000. The number came in at 20,000. That's a miss. It's weak. Let's say the number came in at 500,000. That's a major beat. That is strong. So what's the economic data looking tonight? Folks, across the land, the vast majority of the economic data that came in from Wall Street, and there's a lot more coming this next week with the CPI number, was weak. It was very weak, the economic data that came in the last 7 days. This, my friends, is number one, good for Joe Biden and the Build Back Better Act. Because if the data is weak, there's more support to pass the Build Back Better Act. It's also good for your SS 300. Because if the data is so weak, the Federal Reserve may understand it can't come in too aggressively. What was that economic data in the last few days? Let's go over it right now. First, The housing industry is clearly in recession. The housing starts are down for 4 consecutive months in a row. Number one, the labor shortage in the housing market causing major supply chain disruption as the cost to repair a home and build a home surging out of control. Number three, the mortgage industry to highest levels of the 30-year fixed mortgage, 5.01% plus. We haven't seen these levels since the 1980s. Out of control. No one will be able to buy a home. No one will be able to afford a home. Then the auto industry showing major drop in auto sales. Yes, of those two industries, I'm predicting that housing and auto is already in U.S. recession. Then what else did we see come in? We also saw other economic data come in, and guess what? It wasn't particularly good. First, we saw the GDP, the gross national product number, come in. What is the gross national product? It shows how big the U.S. economy is growing or not growing. Positive number means it's growing. Negative number means recession. So what did the number come in at? It was expected at 7.1%. It was a miss, 6.9%. And then analysts said it may be 4% next month. Then they also said, when looking at that GDP number, don't get surprised. By the end of the year, it's a very, very flat number. A number like 1% or 0.5% is not recession, but it's the last step before recession. My prediction tonight is that the national GDP in the United States will be around 1% or lower by December. And I'm predicting we're going into recession in 2023 and 2024. That's coming up later in this recording. So if that data is so fluid, what data looked good this week? There was some very good data, and that was on the labor front. Unemployment data that came in Thursday was absolutely a massive beat, number one. The number of new unemployment claims released on Thursday, the latest recording, as I've covered on this channel for 2 years, as this channel approaches its 2-year anniversary, April 25th, 2022, was astronomically out of the ballpark. It was the lowest number of new unemployment claims in a weekly reporting since the 1960s. 166,000 new unemployment claims in the entire United States last week. Then the number of continuing unemployment claims, you ready for this one, folks? Astronomically low. In 2020, the number of unemployment claims that were continuing was out of control. If you're watching this channel at the time, it was 25 million, 30-something million. In 2021, the second year of the pandemic, it dropped to 8.5 million continuing unemployment claims. People still unemployed week after week. Where was it this week? 1.8 million, dropping from 18 million the year before. Moreover, the data showed that for every unemployed person, there is 6 jobs available. A lot of confusing data. The takeaway is that the collective data is generally misses. But Wall Street, the Jay Powell people, and also the White House executives also looked a lot at that unemployment number. So one of the most important numbers was really strong this week, while a lot of the other data was very bad. What is also particularly weak, which is very important for you? Consumer confidence. Consumer confidence, which is bred upon people understanding that a recession may be around the corner or inflation is out of control, is dropping dramatically. And if you lose the consumer's confidence, you're going sideways. The takeaway tonight is that this is all great news for Build Back Better Act, number one. Big news supporting it because legislators want to give you money when the economy is struggling. The economy is struggling tonight, folks. It's clearly struggling. And where it is tonight for April 9, 2022, it's going to be worse in just 60 days from now. And then it's going to be worse by the fall and substantially worse by December. The trajectory, for example, at the moment is that we're at 6.9% U.S. growth of the economy, meaning the economy is growing slowly at about 6.9%. By December, we're likely to be 0. That's a slowing economy. You need support. That's exactly what the Bernie Sanders of the world would say, do this support. And while the unemployment number may show that the unemployment's not the problem, there is cost of living trouble across the land. And that is why it's so exciting for me to report to you that as soon as a check becomes law, I immediately hunt it out, find it, and deliver it to you. Let's make this clear. There's 2 ways that laws become laws in the United States: by Congress voting or by the president making it executive action. And I have not 1, not 2, but 3 checks for you tonight. As soon as they became law, I immediately featured it on this channel. immediately featured in prime time on Evenings LALATE, and then immediately featured in the membership newsletter. The first check has now been law for 5 weeks. So that is why you always want to watch the show every night, because you don't want to miss when a new check becomes law. It's not necessarily by Congress, it's often by the president. And the checks do not have unlimited funds. They will run out. Let's look at those 3 big checks tonight as a preview of what's coming up after the commercial break. There are 3 checks now law tonight, and what are they? Check A $6,500 check, the Homeowners Weatherizing Grant Check. It became law on March 31st, 2022. You already saw it earlier in this video. This was in the second cluster, taken out by Joe Biden, made law, and landing in people's bank accounts across the land. Check B. It was also in Build Back Better Act, taken out by the president March 4th, made law that day, and immediately paying out $15,000 to $80,000. For example, when it became law March 4th, guess when it was recorded on this channel? March 4th. Guess when it became part of the newsletter? March 4th. How many other people had coverage of this anywhere across financial news? 0. That's why you don't want to miss this channel. And then an MSC check, $24,000, $2,000 on average, 12 months on average. Many viewers averaging $45,000. Some viewers getting over $150,000. When it become law? 2021. We're going to go over each of these incredible checks after the commercial break. Get your pen and paper ready. We can go over all those incredible checks. But first, before the commercial break, become a member. Because in the membership newsletter, Monday through Friday, you get the links to apply for these big grants. They're free money. They're your money. You deserve it. That newsletter comes Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, via the YouTube alert system. Also, in the second half, we'll be looking on what's going on with that 6th stimulus. The President of the United States, his job is to solve equations. But he's not solving the situation for oil, or wheat, or grain, or corn, or the banking exposure to Vladimir Putin. We'll be looking at that situation on 6 stimulus. And what is working and what isn't working. Then we'll be looking at student loan debt forgiveness. That's 7 stimulus. Then we'll be looking forward as to where this economy is and where the economy is going. Are we in recession? Are we heading in recession? What does this mean for you? I'll give you a learning curve at the very end of this video and more insight about checks. You want to learn more about checks and how to cash checks? They're coming up later in this video, because that is the approach and the mindset you need to have in an economy in which there's a lot of tug and pull. Great data, bad data. Inflation, recession. Stagflation, interest rates, inversion curve. A lot of details happening at the same time. And what's important to know is that you need to be ahead of the curve. You need to know what it is before it happens. And you won't have to worry about that, because it's coming up right after the commercial break. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds from the shores of Santa Monica, California for April 9th, 2022. It's a big broadcast with a lot of breaking news still happening in the second half. I'm excited you're here. I'll be back with you in 60 seconds. But if you become a member, here's a little bit about the members community page if you have questions. See you back in 60 seconds as a big broadcast of Evenings LALATE continues. If you want money right now, not 5 days from now, and not 5 weeks from now, then reach out to the community page. The volunteers can help you find that money for rent and utilities. That's at news.la.com/community. The community page features a series of volunteers who are viewers like you. They can help you find rent, utilities, SNAP, food benefits, mortgage assistance, and help you with eviction moratorium questions as well. Their Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram individuals reach out to them and indicate the city and state you're from, and they'll get back to you shortly. That's a community page. Volunteers working for you, viewers helping one another. Stay with LA for more. Join LALATE Daily for the excitement of the new LALATE live daily. The excitement starts on Mornings LALATE at 9 a.m. Home LALATE returns at 11 a.m. daily. And then afternoons LALATE at 1 p.m. Join us daily as the excitement continues live from Santa Monica on LALATE. And the big second half of Evenings LA for April 9, 2022 heats up right now as six stimulus still on the burner. But will it get done? All the latest details in the big second half, then student loan debt forgiveness. And then we'll be looking back as to what Jay Powell will and won't do with those inflationary pressures and whether or not the Federal Reserve is doing the right thing or sending us into recession. As we go into a big, bold, beautiful evening tonight, everything is looking pretty along the beach. But for supply chain in the ports and in the shippers, not so pretty across the board. We'll be looking at why that supply chain may pivot a big push to get Build Back Better Act done, and why it also may pivot Jay Powell to back off on his pressure for those interest rate spikes. Plus, we'll be looking at student loan debt forgiveness in the second half of this video. But first, let's start with those big checks. Great news and big news breaking tonight. 3 checks have landed, A, B, and C. They're all checks. They're all grants. They're all free money. They ain't income. So if you get the check, it does not disqualify you from anything. And they're huge. They're law, and they were all made law in just recent months. Some of them in recent days. Let's go over to check A, B, and C broadly, and then we'll go over each of them in specifics. A is a $6,500 homeowners weatherizing grant check, made law March 31st by executive authority by Joe Biden, taken out of Build Back Better Act, made law by the president. Then, a $15,000 to $80,000 check made law by the President of the United States on March 4th, taken out of Build Back Better Act. It is now law. And finally, an MSC check, $2,000 a month over 12 months average, but many viewers getting upwards of $45,000 on average on this channel, and a lot getting over $150,000. We go over each of these checks in detail, A, B, and C. And I hope you became a member during the commercial break. Remember, these are all available to members, these checks, in the newsletter Monday through Friday. Let's turn over to each of those checks, starting with the first one right now. That first check is check A. And that check A is huge. How much is it? It is $6,500 to $12,000, because in some states they're actually paying upwards of $12,000. What is it? It's a forced stimulus check. It was in the Build Back Better Act, in the incredible Build Back Better Act, but taken out of second cluster made by law by the President of the United States. How much does it pay? $75,000 less, single individual, you get it. Married couple, $150,000 less, you get it. If you're on benefits, SSI, SSDI, Social Security, veterans benefits, you can get it as well. What do you need? You need to be a homeowner. Homeowner, don't worry about the word home and don't worry about the words weatherizing. Why? It's called the Homeowners Weatherizing Grant, but don't wait to apply concerned about those words, because ultimately the recording you're watching and the application will answer the question for you. So don't worry whether it's a mobile home or not a mobile home. Don't worry if you're in Kansas, it says we cover for surf warnings. And don't worry if you're in California and it says we cover for tornadoes. We have earthquakes. We don't need tornadoes as well. I understand. Don't worry. Just apply. Go right to the application right tonight and apply. So how do you apply for the application? How do you get these big checks? You become a member. The membership details is featured in the big newsletter, comes out Monday through Friday. Become a member. The link's at the top of the chat, the pin comment, Purple Hawk, Purple Power, or Calcino VIP. Number 1. Number 2, get that big newsletter. Comes out Monday through Friday. Number 3, where does it land? It lands 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time via the YouTube alert system. So let's go back to that check A. You open the newsletter. You go in the newsletter. Go under the information about the price of oil, the price of wheat, the price of grain tonight. And then right under that is check A. Oh, boy. You learn a little bit more about it because it's featured a little bit more in the newsletter. And then you click the link, goes right into a federal website. Then you choose your respective state, like Alabama, and apply for the weatherizing grant check in Alabama. It'll say Alabama weatherizing grant check. And bounce, and you will get it. Viewers have gotten an application on file, viewers have gotten approved, and there is check A. Check B looks like check A. Let's look at the details right now. It is a $15,000 to $80,000 check, and it is also incredible law. Made by law by President Joe Biden, by taken out of the forced stimulus recon and done by executive action March 4th. So this is over 1 month old. And yes, it will run out of money. So let's look at that check B right now. That check B is huge. It is $15,000 to $80,000, number 1. Number 2, the viewers of the channel have gotten upwards of $60,000 to $80,000. Next, it is a forced stimulus check taken out of Build Back Better Act. Then the income qualification, the same as a stimulus check. Single individual, $75,000 or less, and married couple, $150,000 or less. It is a grant, like all these other checks. And as a grant, it is not income. It's not taxable, does not disqualify you from benefits, does not require a credit check. It's not a loan. So this is called a homeowner's grant check. Where is in the newsletter? It's right under check A. With this one, you're going to read a little bit more about it because guess what? It pays for a lot of great stuff. More than just weatherizing, and this pays for home repairs and lots of other items. What items? It featured in the newsletter. Then it's going to give you the links to apply. And those links will go into the national website. You choose your state, and then you pounce and apply at your state level. What's important to understand is that when you're looking at tonight's recording, when you're taking notes and following along, and you think to yourself, maybe not, do not wait. Every day you wait, you're costing yourself a shoot in the foot. Why? Because what's at issue here is that these programs are run by your states. And that every day that you wait it out and don't apply, don't become a member, don't get the newsletter, don't pounce, thousands of people in your state apply in front of you. And it slows down the process, slows down your routing time, and ultimately it may slow down your wallet because you may not get the check. They may run out of money. So become a member. The membership links at the top of the chat and the pinned comment. Purple Hawk, Purple Power, or Calcino VIP. Get that membership newsletter tonight and Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and pounce and get that application on file so you can get that big check across the board. What's at issue? Well, there is a third check, and that third check is check C. Here's what you need to know about that third check. That third check is huge. And that third check has lots of money. And what's money an issue in this third check is huge. Let's look at the details right now. That third check is different than A and B. What's important to know is that A check and B check involve going to a website. The C check does not. Let's compare. A, B, and C, homeowners can get. C, renters can get. So homeowners, you can get A through C, all included, whereas renters, you get check C. Let's go to check C and see how it's slightly different than A and B. Check C is a $24,000 on average MSE check. That check is delivered $2,000 a month for 12 months, huge, to you when you pounce. Compared to Build Back Better Act, it's a lot more checks. Build Back Better Act proposes 6 checks. This is on average 12 checks. Build Back Better Act proposes $7,000, $2,000 the first month, $1,000 thereafter. This on average is $24,000. But many of you are getting upwards of $45,000. If you've been with this channel for a while, then you know how big these numbers are. Let's take a look at the numbers. These are numbers that viewers have gotten from this. Just in rent alone, look at these numbers. Look at the utility numbers, huge. Let's look at the combo numbers, absolutely enormous. They get bigger by the minute. Mark at over 100,000 grew from 50,000. Lorraine at 105, she grew to 120. These are astronomical checks across the land. So what is different on check C? On check C, you're using your telephone. Unlike A and B, where you're going to a website, you're using your phone on check C, so you can do this. You pick up the phone, you call. That's what you're doing. You're not going to a website. You can call. So who do you call? Let's go over the details right now of those people you reach out to and call. So where do you get these checks? You want to reach out to a series of places to get the information and get the money right today. I'm going to go over all those details right now. You're going to reach out to your city hall, your city housing authority, your county hall, and your county housing authority. Also, your state hall and your state housing authority. And the keywords you're going to say are rent assistance because of COVID, utility or mortgage utility assistance because of COVID. 3 things you must do. You must reach out to all 6 places. You must get multiple applications on file. And you must do multiple rounds. Now listen, you must say those key words. Also open the membership newsletter because guess what? In that membership newsletter, it features other places you can reach out to besides those, like the nonprofits. The nonprofits, no less than 6 other places you can reach out to get those big sums of money. That'll give more opportunity to get sums of money. Upwards of $45,000. Average viewer of the channel has gotten across the land. Get those big checks today. Get those big checks tonight. Those are checks that are available to you, and you want to pounce across the board. Let's go back into that MSC and understand how this is better than anything that Build Back Better had in it. It's better than Build Back Better. The average payout from these MSC checks under third stimulus are $2,000 a month for 12 months. But many viewers are averaging about $45,000. Some viewers are averaging over $150,000. Build Back Better Act, $7,000. Average checks from these, 12 checks. Build Back Better, 6 checks. Why would you think about Build Back Better when you can get this? you're going to last a lot longer on $45,000 than a mere $7,000. So don't be thinking about Build Back Better Act. And remember, they promised $2,000 the first month, $1,000 thereafter. They did not promise under Build Back Better Act anything bigger than that. That is the great news about those 3 checks. But the better news is that you can get them right tonight across the land when you pounce starting this evening. A, B, and C. Where do you get those big checks? You want to become a member. Go right in that membership newsletter tonight and get those big sums of checks. And where is that membership newsletter? The membership newsletter is available for members Monday through Friday. And how do you become a member? Go under this video, become it right now. Click the link, Purple Hawk, Purple Power, or Calcino VIP. Get that membership newsletter Monday through Friday, 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time via the YouTube alert system and thereafter. And there you go. Those are the big checks that are abounds in that big package tonight. Now let's go back into the great news about what's happening thereafter. Where are we looking at the future of things across the land? Well, we're looking at this economy potentially shrinking and a GDP shrinking as well. But that 6th stimulus was supposed to be next on the horizon. Well, 7 stimulus may actually come faster. Why? 7 stimulus has a May 2nd inherent deadline at the moment set by the White House. 3 opportunities for the President of the United States to deal with student loan debt forgiveness. Let's go over the 3 options the President has seen. 1, to forgive the repayment of the student loan debt inherently. Number 2, to just extend the moratorium on the repayment, the freeze. Or number 3, do nothing. I don't think number 3 is an opportunity. So I do think that number 1 or number 2 would happen. Why is the forgiveness of student loan debt heating up more today than ever before? Because the education secretary under Biden said that he would forgive, that Joe Biden can forgive student loan debt, that it became a law under Barack, and that Joe Biden knows he has that authority to do it, so why not do it? In fact, if Joe Biden did it, there's not enough Republican votes to undo it across the land. That is the latest on 7 stimulus. Now, 6 stimulus gets very interesting tonight. 6 stimulus is that progressive allegiance of the White House, France, and Germany to get off of those Russian products. How did this happen? And what is the update tonight on this front as well? Let's go over the details of it right tonight. It started with Vladimir Putin understanding that when he impact people with his oil, he can impact other economies like our own with a recession. And that is what's potentially growing tonight. Let's look at the situation and what that allegiance has done and hasn't done. The White House had reached out to, with Anthony Blinken, your Secretary of State, France and Germany in week 1 of the invasion of Ukraine and said, get off of those Russian products. Germany said, no, we are not, because German economists think differently than U.S. economists. Then Blinken pushed back and said, you must. And then we thought that we had a deal, France, Germany, the United States, the progressive allegiance of 3 countries. With France's President Macron going up for re-election in April, we are ready to rock and roll. And then suddenly, Germany said the shocking statement this last week, no, we're not getting off of Russian products. Knocking off of Russian products? Once they say it's morally responsible to get off of them, and then they're not. And then what about France? Well, at the moment, it looks like 6 stimulus would at least be a U.S. package to provide stimulus to its citizens because of the price of wheat, grain, and commodities, the price of oil, unsustainable. At the current levels, we're heading in recession. What is the situation tonight? And where are we going? And what is important for you to know on your money? The concept of 6 stimulus is that if you don't solve these situations, we go into recession. What are the situations? They are oil. They are the commodities like wheat, and they are the banking industry. And what is the situation tonight? No solution at all. That means we're likely to go into recession. Now, remember, I told you that week 1 of the invasion of Ukraine, if the price of gasoline at the pump state remains where it is through the month of May, we go into recession. So we are now in early April, mid-April, and we're still at the same price at the pump. 424, folks. I can just press stop on the recording right now and say, hey, see you in the recession, because that's where we're going. 424 is not sustainable. We already know this. Price of bread, say $7 a loaf of bread, not sustainable. We go in recession. And when we talk about recession, we're talking about 2 years. So does the president still have time? He does have time. He has about a month's time to work with. And what the president has done has been really almost nothing. Actually, it's been some stuff, but all incorrect. President a week ago announced a deal to bring down price of gasoline at the pump. Has it worked? No. Did I tell you it was going to work? No, I told you it was not going to work. And guess what? It does not work. The way that oil works is that when there's a shortage of oil internationally, not just in the United States, the price goes up for everyone internationally. So if you're one country with one leader saying, hey, I'm going to release some oil in our country, it doesn't bring down your price because the price is dependent upon the international availability of oil. And if there's an international shortage of oil, then the international price of oil goes higher, including your price at the pump. Pretty simple, isn't it? White House didn't catch it. The White House said they're releasing 1 million barrels of gasoline domestically from the strategic reserves, which are our stockpile, our storage room of oil, per day for the 6 months that follow thereafter. What did the oil market say about that? Not much of anything. In fact, the price of Brent crude internationally is 102. That's not a sustainable number. And even 110 or 108, not a sustainable number. And that's right after the news. You expect it to drop dramatically. It doesn't work. In fact, the White House said we're going to get part of our strategic alliance, Western allies, to release some of their oil. They have not. Why not? Because they don't have oil. It doesn't make any sense. What is being said by the White House literally makes no sense in the oil environment. And what have we gotten out of this whole oil situation? A parade of oil executives at Capitol Hill to say you're price gouging. Does that bring down the price of oil? It doesn't. The price of oil is not the fault of the oil executives. It's the fault of the Western allies. It's the fault of every Western ally leader to not get oil released. What were the options? What were the situations? Where are we going with it tonight? The situation was detailed by me to you in October of 2021. Right before Halloween, I said there's 100,000 Russian troops at the Ukrainian border. If they invade Ukraine, we're having a major economic event next year, the largest of next year. And guess what? It's going to immediately impact oil and other things. I was not alone. The White House told the same thing to Janet Yellen, says Janet Yellen. Did the White House task Janet Yellen with a solution? No, because clearly she doesn't have a solution. The White House had a lot of opportunities. Venezuela, the biggest producer and exporter of oil. Get a deal with them. No, didn't do that because Venezuela is heavily embargoed by the United States. Get a deal with OPEC. Get them to release some oil. OPEC looked at the situation and they said, no, thank you. Now, did the White House really push? Ironically, I featured on this channel on Evenings Elliott about 2 weeks ago that Iraq got a phone call from Joe Biden. They refused to return the phone call. Why? Because they had heard, Iraq is part of OPEC, by the way, they had heard that the White House was only working on a deal with Iran. So choose your sides, you White House, and go with it. Well, the White House had chosen a very good side. It was a great idea. It was the Iranian oil deal. The JCPOA, this is how you make a deal. This is how you solve world economic crises. The JCPOA is a very old standing agreement. One of the items are very well understood in the oil environment, which is an agreement to disarm nuclear warheads in Iran in exchange for releases of millions of barrels of Iranian oil. Now, this is more than anything we have in our strategic reserves, and this would bring down the price of gasoline internationally to its lowest levels of a generation. In fact, we had all the details featured on the channel. Forgot them? I got them back on air tonight. Here are the details of that deal for March 18th, 2022. I had told you that Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had reached out to the United States and said, are you allowing the Russians to trade with Iran? The White House said yes. So Lavrov said, go ahead and do the deal, the JCPOA. We will bless it. This is a 2015 deal with a return Iranian oil back to the markets with 1.5 million barrels of oil per day by December, 500,000 barrels today. It all looked good. We, in fact, had even the exchange of prisoners involved. A British Iranian dual national who had been in Iranian detention for 4 years would be returned back to the UK, the British citizen, and then $530 million of debt that is owned by Iran that's being held by the UK would be released. It was all lined up beautifully, and would bring down the price of gasoline to its lowest level of generation. Suddenly, silence, nothing, no mention of it. In fact, the White House didn't mention it wasn't happening. The Germans weren't mentioning it. They negotiated on behalf of us for the JCPOA in Vienna. And then I had to look high and low to see what happened to the deal. And finally, I found in a buried news article out of Europe that said that EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell says, sometimes you think you're there, and other times the days are not. The JCPOA is not coming to an end. That is why when the President of the United States addressed the American people and saying I'm bringing down the price of gasoline at the pump, I was expecting him to say JCPOA was announced and we have a deal. He did not. He, in fact, talked about releasing strategic reserves domestically. That doesn't do anything. Then he talked about our partner Western allies releasing their reserves. They don't have anything. And then he didn't mention about any of these oils coming from international release. Simply not to par. The situation is far from over when we look at the other issues across the land, which is supply chain. Supply chain. You already understood that supply chain is causing inflation. Supply chain causes inflation. Well, what's the supply chain issue here? The supply chain is not just the ports and is not just the train tracks. It is also the situation that you cannot get those products to international markets. And what are those products? They are wheat, grain, soybean, corn, and oil. If you remember this channel and you get that membership newsletter Monday through Friday, you see the price of wheat and corn going to a 10-year high. It's because all that wheat that comes from the beautiful Black Sea region of Ukraine, gone, not available for the season, unable to be harvested. Its farmers are battling the war. Next season, a loss. They can't prepare the soil next season. And the seasons after that, potentially lost as well, as the war may go on for months, if not years. Domestically, what does that cause us to have? Major problems domestically back at home, because guess what? Your price of bread is going through the roof. Again, price inflation. This is price inflation. This is the price of wheat bread, breakfast cereal, and similar, surging out of control. And again, that is price inflation. That's nothing the Federal Reserve can do. Federal Reserve coming in and saying, we're going to raise interest rates. That will give you higher interest rates, but it won't solve the price of bread inflation. Bread inflation is supply chain. That is what's going on with the wheat situation. So has the White House solved that equation? It is not. It has turned our backs on that situation as well. Finally, this next week, we're going to see whether the U.S. banks are going to get hit majorly by their exposure to Russian debt. That Russian debt exposure, we don't know at the time of recording. Guess what? It's believed to be very large. Russian debt repayments may default or may have already defaulted. We don't know just as of tonight's recording. And those debt involvements expose U.S. banks to major potential losses, a line item. We won't know if U.S. banks had major exposure to Russian debt or Russian equities until they report their earnings in the next few days. And during those corporate earnings, they're going to announce whether there's a downside across the board. Meantime, let's put it all back in perspective and understand where this economy is, where is it going, and what you need to know tonight. What's at issue tonight is a lot of fluid situation, and I want to explain to you where we are and where we're going. Number one, recession, inflation, stagflation, very, very different words. Let's analyze what it means for you and also to understand where on that trajectory you are tonight. It was over a month ago on this channel that I predicted that this U.S. economy will go into recession. It was less than a month ago that I said that 2 industries are in recession and the remainders will come thereafter. My position tonight is the same. The housing industry already in recession, in my opinion, and the auto industry are in recession. The remaining industries will go into recession next year as a collective force and be in there for 2 years. Remember, geographically, different parts of the country go into recession before other parts across the board. Do I see any bubbles? Remember, bubbles are often what cause recessions. We had the tech bubble. We've had other bubbles where the bubble bursts and suddenly we all swarm into recession. When does a bubble burst? When people had a sort of rose-colored glasses look to the situation and thought everything was perfect, and then suddenly the floor under them caved in. Out of New York, we see that situation tonight. We had one of the major real estate companies out in New York in a series of new quotes this last week that said, the New York market's great, record sales across the board. The interviewer asked the real estate company, but look at the mortgage rate. It's the highest mortgage rate since the 1980s, 5%. Who can afford a mortgage rate? The average sale of a 4-bedroom apartment in New York is $6 million. The response was most people are buying with cash. That is pure bubble, lacking fundamental statements across the board. Most people don't have $6 million to buy an apartment in New York. And the people who are buying $6 million apartments in New York are not generally buying on cash. It doesn't make inherent sense. It lacks fundamentals. And that is where you see a potential implosion. Also yesterday, I went to just a local website here in California to look at a U.S. auto manufacturer's inventory of cars for sale here in Southern California. They did not list the prices. They said, come and contact us to go over the prices. Guess what? How many of those cars do they have available? 2, 3 because of supply chain, because of big demand? No, they had over 40 to 50 of those cars. Shows you a lot. They're thinking everything is going to have the opportunity for them to overprice the car? No. This is sort of what the president did last week, where he talked about everyone go buy an electric vehicle for $150,000. No one's doing that. That's just mindset out of left field. The situation is very clear tonight. Where are we as economy? Where we are as economy is unsustainable levels for inflation. And that price inflation is products and also oil. Oil's unsustainable at 424. If it continues through the month of May, which is just 30 days away, we're heading to recession 2 years. Price of Brent, unsustainable at these levels. 4 more weeks of it, we're going into 2 years of recession. It's getting very dicey here. We're waiting to the very 11th hour. But guess what? I think that Jay Powell is going to make it worse. I think you're going to see more and more analysts from Wall Street in the next few days say that Jay Powell is going to make the situation worse. It's one thing to have inflation. It's one thing to have inflation, but to have recession and inflation, or to have recession after inflation, it's really bad. Let me explain to you the situation. What does inflation look to you right tonight? You have a job maybe, and the job pays you a little bit more than it did 2 years ago, but the price of goods have gone up more in 2 years. So your salary check is not paying for stuff like it used to. That is the impact of inflation. What would recession look like compared to inflation? This is what recession would look like instead of recession. What recession would look like instead of inflation. Recession would look like the following. Your business, or the business you work for, would suddenly go from projecting 7% growth this year, to literally zero growth. That means that the business and the U.S. economy may not grow at all this year. That is what happens right before recession. When you're in a recession, then what happens? The growth goes to zero or negative. Imagine your business was growing, 2%, 5% this year, maybe 6%, and then suddenly it shrinks and does nothing at all. That is what GDP looks like before you go into recession. It goes from a staggering 6.9% right now, missing at 7.1% prediction, and then slumping down to potentially 1 or 0%. Then what happens thereafter? Businesses start to lay off. Then there's a hiring freeze. Then no one's hiring anyone. Then you bought that house thinking that the markets were all high and that you could always sell it. Suddenly you can't sell the house because no one can buy it because it's a 5% mortgage rate. Should I continue? Yeah, that is what recession looks like. If you haven't been through a recession before, it is much worse than recession. Most analysts, and more analysts in my prediction, will say the following. We can endure inflation. We can endure inflation because the labor numbers are good. We can increase the price for labor, pay people more money, but we can't endure recession. In my opinion, you endured 2 years of lockdown. I was the guy that sat there and got people $50,000, $150,000 EIDL loans and grants to save their businesses. Many times I had stories I feature on this channel where I saved their businesses 24 hours before they're going under. Imagine after doing 2 years of those lockdowns where you're about to lose your business, and now you thought 2022 is going to be your gangbuster year, and then suddenly 2023 is going to be the year in which your business contracts again, much like a lockdown. That's what a recession is. That is why there's going to need to be a very big, major wake-up call for all the focuses of this channel and for all the focuses of you. Our wake-up call is getting checks. That's why I'm playing it a little bit of a heavy hand tonight. It's important to understand that those checks are available right now. So there's a $6,500 check right now. Are you available to get it? Go get it. $15,000, $80,000 check. Have you gotten? Go get it. MSC checks at $24,000. Go get it. Imagine how many things the White House has to fix in the next 30 days. And you're sitting around saying to yourself, you know what? I'd rather have the check sent by IRS rather than pick up the phone. Why? You'd rather have 6 checks at $7,000 versus 12 checks at $24,000 because you don't want to use the telephone and you want to risk it based upon what's going on at all these equations tonight. That's not how you approach it. You pounce and get every check throughout the land. Ultimately, I do think we can solve this. I do think we can get the price of oil down. I do think we can get the price of bread down as well. But ultimately, it involves some allegiances, and we saw how allegiances work very quickly when done correctly. Janet Yellen did a great job earlier this year or last year when she got the global minimum tax rate raised during the allegiances of the Western allies. It's times like right now that you have Germany going offhand and back on book, then off book. You got to rope in Germany and say, hey, get off of those Russian products. You got to get France to take the lead and say, let's get the 6 stimulus done. You got to get the lead by example, by getting an alternative Russian oil ready, not just releasing your strategic reserves. That's not a solution. We'll be featuring more about this in the next week, but next week CPI and additional numbers. For April 9, 2022, a lot of breaking news throughout the night, and it's far from over. I look forward to seeing you throughout the night. Evenings LALATE every night at 5 o'clock, then Evenings Countdown at 6 o'clock. Stream and Sinless at 7 o'clock, Evenings Extra at 8 o'clock, and Sunset at 9 o'clock. From the shores of Santa Monica to the shores of the Black Sea, from my home to your home, stay with me. Grab all those checks. Never think that there's a time not to grab a check. When a check is available, you get it, and you run with it. You run along the beach with it. You run by the check on the beach and you wave at the check with your checks. That's how we rock and roll. We don't look misty. We look deliciousness when we go to that beach with all those checks in hands. Get those checks, A, B, and C tonight. Become a member. Go right into the video and become a member right tonight so you can get that newsletter Monday through Friday. Stay informed, stay focused, have a beautiful night, and join me nightly for Evenings LALATE, America's most watched show for prime time in financial news. Stay informed, stay focused, and stay with LALATE for more.